Okay, so today is user forms. Folks, user forms introduce a new idea to VBA that we haven't dealt with before, and it's the idea of event-driven programming. So far, everything that we've done has been you say run the code, and the code runs in the order that you specify. That changes today. Beginning today, we're not quite sure the order that the code we write is going to execute. And so that's what we're going to do. So let's go ahead and create a form. Alt F11. In fact, I guess we're going to start off just by doing the homework. If you wanted to bring up your homework assignment, it might not be a bad place to start, but we can just do that. We'll do that again right here in class. So insert a user form. It turns out that a user form has a module built into it. Still, the only place we put code that's going to get saved in this workbook has to be in a module. We're going to put code in this user form, but it's actually going to be inside a module in this user form. We'll see that here in just a bit. All right. I'm trying to remember what the homework did. It just had you put on a couple of labels, a couple of buttons, and a couple of... Okay, did you change any other properties? Okay, so let's take a look. Just before we put anything on this user form, let's change the name of this form. So I think you already started with a form. I wanted to make sure that it was named right. But here's how we change the name of the form the same way we change the name of any of the controls on the form, is with the name property. So we're going to call this FRM login. Give it a name. It turns out that one of the conventions in naming objects on forms, or they're called controls, all the things in this little box are called controls. Seems like a really weird thing to call them to me, but that's what they're called. There's like a 3-letter prefix that's kind of the standard prefix whenever you're naming one of these. Because now, I mean, imagine I'm going to have a text box for the username or for the email. I'm going to have a label for the email. And if I have to name them both, I want to call them both email, but I got to have a way to kind of keep them different because the names can't be the same. And so the idea is we'll put a prefix on that. And so the standard prefix for a user form is just FRM. So F3 characters, FRM, login. Is it critical that you know what the standard ones are? No, not really, but it'd be helpful to you if when you're developing a form, if you kind of use the same prefix for all of them. You'll get familiar with the ones that I use here, which are fairly standard. And I'll change the caption on this as well. Login credentials. All right. I'm going to bring on a text box. I will name, or I'm sorry, a label. Remember how to do the label from the homework. It's a capital A. Not going to double click it, darn it. I'm going to change the name to LBL email. And I'll change the caption to be email. Maybe I'll put a colon after it. Then I'll bring in a text box. Set the size for that text box. And I will name this one TXT email. I remember when I was first working with user forms, I just thought it seems like so much work to have to name all these things. I mean, they have perfectly good names. Text box 1. I'll just go with that. And could I? Could I write my program with that name? Sure. And if it's a really simple form, you get by with that. But if it gets remotely complex, you'll be glad for the time you spent naming these things. There's a question in here somewhere? Oh. Yeah, so I was getting those to pop up because they disappear when you come over here, and then when you come back to the form, they reappear. But if they're not showing, it's this little toolbox right here that looks vaguely communist. You've got a hammer and a wrench crossed. I'm always a little nervous to click on it, not sure what's going to happen, but so far the only thing it does is bring up the toolbox. Did that answer the question? Yep. All right, so I want another copy of these, so I'll just do Control C and Control V, and that'll give me a copy of those. The names now will have reverted back to kind of their standard default names, so these will be like label 1 and probably text box 1. So I'll change the caption of this one to be password. Oh yeah, I want to be thanks LBL password, and the caption to be password. And I'll change the text box to be TXT password. All right. let's just go ahead and take a look at what we have so far. You can see what the form does just by clicking on the green play button. As long as the form is active, just play and it'll say, oh, you must want to run the form. This doesn't look too bad. I can put in my email address, gov@byu.edu, and then I can put in my password. What's wrong with putting a password in this way? Yeah, I have someone looking over my shoulder or looking at the screen, they're going to know my password. So it turns out the good folks in Redmond, Washington have anticipated this very problem. There's a property of the password, or I'm sorry, there's a property of a text box called password char. I scroll down here to password char, I can put a character in there. I could put, we're at BYU after a while, I could put a capital Y. And so now, when I run that, whatever I put into my password, whatever characters I type here, it's just going to echo the capital letter Y. So you might want to put a star there or something. But my favorite thing to do here is to choose a different font, because you can change the font of these as well. So I'm going to choose Wingdings. So I've got to find the font property. Cittahoma, that's so boring. Let's come down here and find Wingdings. And say OK. And then for the, I can't remember the one I like, darn it. There's one that makes, I'm just going to guess. It's probably wrong. I think on that one, I got to find a password character. Where'd it go? There's the Y. Let me put capital M. Is that the one? I just don't remember now. Got to be on the form, push play. Yeah, that's the one. Looks like a little bomb getting ready to explode. The point is, so you can put, whatever character you want, but you can choose the font, so have some fun with it. Well, the point is, I can set the property. That's all right. I'm just changing properties of an object. Right? There's a property called font, property called password character, and it changes the way that the object is. All right. So far, so good. How are we doing? Let's go ahead and put a couple of command buttons on this. So you might think that the name for the prefix for a command button is like button, BTN or something, but it's actually CMD is the standard one. Short for command button. I'll call this CMD OK. And for the caption, I'll just put OK. The reason it's CMD instead of just button is that several of these other controls are also called buttons. This one's called an option button, and this one's called a toggle button. It was a really bad idea from the 1990s. But it's still around. I'll show it to you later. Don't use it. There. I'll just copy this. Another way you can copy is just by holding the control key down and then just doing a drag. That'll help make a copy of that button exactly the same size. I'll call this one cancel. Then we'll change some properties of these buttons. CMD cancel. Caption is cancel. Okay, turns out, have you ever been on a user form, a form in some application, and you went to hit enter, and it clicked the OK button? It actually does the same thing as, it doesn't do what enter normally would do. It turns out that's something that we can set. So for this OK button, I can have one button on my form that's the default button that says, hey, when the user clicks, or when the user presses enter, then behave as if the user clicked on this button. And that property is called default. So it's right here. It's called the default property. And I'm going to change that to true. By making this one true, I'll say, OK, that's the button. And you'll notice it gets a little darker line around it. So you can see that's the default button. It turns out that every button has a property called cancel as well. So I can say, you know what? This is the cancel button. What keystroke do you think invokes the cancel button? Yeah, escape. So now I've set this form up so if the user presses enter on this form, it's going to be exactly the same thing as clicking on the OK button. If the user presses the escape button, then it's going to be the same thing as clicking cancel. So that's nice. You don't have to worry about saying, well, what do we do? How do we figure out how to make this thing do something when the user presses enter? That's now built in, at least for that simple case. Oh, could we make it opposite? Yeah, you're fun. Say make escape do the OK button. Yeah, because the OK button, in fact, the OK button can be both. So it can be the cancel button and it can be the default. So whether you press OK or enter, it will invoke this. So I mean, you could put them backwards. You'll notice that when I set the OK button's cancel property to true, without alerting me, it set the cancel property of the cancel button back to false. I can only have one cancel button. And we do want it on the cancel button, not on the OK button. Put it back there. Yes? You can probably only have one default button. And you can only have one default button. And the question is, it's only enter that will activate it, and the answer is yes. So enter is what activates the default button. Escape is what activates the cancel button. It doesn't have to be named cancel or OK. I mean, the label or the name is irrelevant. It's just which one button has that property set. Okay, so now let's go ahead and see. So this is pretty much what we had on the homework. We've done a little bit more than you had on the homework. Let's see how we invoke this form. Actually, before we do that, let me just kind of give you a higher level look at user forms. There's two things that we do with user forms that are fundamentally different from each other. One is what we're doing here. We're making a more complex dialog box. There are two built-in functions into the VBA language that allow us to get input from the user. What are they called? For full credit, for class participation. What are the two functions that will bring up, something and let me get some input from the user? Bring up a dialog box and let me get input from the user. Yeah, go ahead. Input box is one of them. You're halfway there. And, take a guess because, it doesn't cost you. Message box is the other one, yeah. And technically there's some others, right? Well, those are the only two that are built into the language, but there's some others we worked with like the file dialog box. Those are all kind of more complex ones. But input box and message box are the ones that are built right into the language. And, I can pop it up and get some input from the user. Now, message box doesn't give me much. I can tell which button they clicked on. Input box doesn't give me much. I can type in one value. And so typically what happens when we're just beginning with this and we need to get some input from the user, we'll put in a series of input boxes. Enter your name, press enter. Now enter your birth date, now press enter. And you don't want to do that. The input box is almost worthless because you so seldom want just one piece of information that you can say, listen, I'm going to make a form that collects all the information from the user. Another nice thing about this is that I can actually now put code onto this form, which we'll see how to do today, that allows me to validate what the user has put in. So when they click on OK, I can say, slow down, cowboy. You haven't filled out your password. You can't click OK if there's no password. You can click cancel, but you can't click OK. And so putting this kind of data validation right onto the input is great because now I could use that form from any place. I just have to say open the form and let the form deal with the validation. I don't have to rewrite that code in multiple places. So that's the first thing that we do with user forms. Its idea is a dialog box. Just pop something up, suspend the operation of the program while the user works with it. Now, the other thing we might do, and we'll spend some time with this on next Monday. Today is Wednesday, yeah. On next Monday, is we might create an interface that the user might sit on and work with for a while. Maybe the form itself will connect on to do a web query and bring some data in. They'll have to look at it and validate some stuff and click save, and it will write it down to a worksheet. It could be something that's up and useful for a while. And so that's what I would, not really creating a dialog box, but creating a custom user interface. And that's a little more involved, but today it's working with a dialog box. So let's see what it takes to open this user form and then to get some output. Get some output from it, be able to read what the user has done. So I'm going to insert a module, regular old module. So insert module, and I've got here modules, now module 1, that looks great. Sub, and here I'm just going to call this login. So the first thing I want to do is I want to open that user form. And here's how I say that. Name of the form, frm login dot, Now, there are 3 different states this user form can be in. It can be unloaded. It's not in memory. It can be loaded, but not visible. Or it can be loaded and visible. So I can say, I haven't read it into memory, or it can be in memory but not being shown, or it can be in memory and being shown. And so let's go ahead and open up the form, but not quite show it yet, and make some change to the form. No, let's go ahead and show the form. After we show the form, then we'll make that other modification to it. So form login dot show. That's all it takes. And the magical part about this is that that is going to suspend the execution of this code until that form is dismissed by one of two ways. So that should be it. I should be able to run this subprocedure, and it should show that form. Click on play, and here's my form. So I could type something in here, put in my password. Now, what are you expecting to happen when I click OK? Yeah, nothing. We haven't put any code behind it yet. Incidentally, it does exactly the same thing as pressing enter. Nothing. Escape doesn't do anything yet either. I can close the form with the red X, so that will close it. All right, so that is how I will get the form to be able to be shown. Over here, I've made a module, and so now I've got, this is a procedure that I could call in any way I call any other subprocedure. But what I can't do is just invoke the form the way I would invoke a subprocedure. Let's just come back to Excel and look at the list of macros. So I'll come to my developer. Here's my list of macros. I've only got one. The user form doesn't show up here. I can't just say open the user form. I have to write a macro, a subprocedure with no parameters, and that can open the user form, and so that's what we've done. Okay, so let's go back to our form, double-click the form, and let's see what it's going to take for us to close this form. Let's do the cancel button first. So I'm going to click on the cancel button. I'm going to click on it once to select it, and then I'm going to double-click it. When I double-click that button, it's going to say, all right, I'm going to go ahead and open up the module, and right now I'm maximized, but if I restore these windows, you'll see my module is open and my user form is open. But this is the module that is built into form login. And because I double-clicked on that cancel button, it said, oh, you probably want to execute some code when the user clicks on that button. And so it wrote this procedure. It's a subprocedure. It's a private subprocedure. What does that mean? We haven't used a private subprocedure before. What does a private mean? Any thoughts? Take a shot at it. Go ahead. Maybe this can't be modified. It takes something more, someone more godlike to be able to modify it. No, it doesn't have to do with what can be modified. In the back? That's exactly what it means. Any of our sub procedure we've made so far, we've just started off by saying sub. Oops. We've just started off by saying sub. This is what we would call a public sub procedure. Back in the early days of VBA, there was no private and public. Everything was public. And then someone said, it'd be nice if we could protect these from, just anyone calling it. And so they said, all right, well, we'll make these other words that you can put on here, private and public. If it's private, it means the only one that can call this subprocedure is going to be other procedures that are inside this module. Same thing if I was making it out here. I could make this one a private subprocedure. Watch this. This can be private. Ooh, P-R-I-V-A-T-E. This can be private too. Now that it's private, it can only be called by another subprocedure inside this module. What happened to the list of macros over here? It's gone. No longer a macro, because to call that, it can only be called by another subprocedure inside the same module. So that's one thing that I can do to say, I've got a bunch of macros in this, but I definitely don't want the user just executing these macros. Good heavens, they do all kinds of crazy things, and if the user just brings it on the list. So one of the things I can do to protect my macros from being executed that way is I can hide them just by making them private. So that's the deep. When I just double click on that button, it says, oh, this is going to be a private subprocedure. And we're going to call it CMD cancel _ click. That name is not arbitrary. The fact that we have a procedure name that is the name of an object _ the name of an event means that's what's going to cause that to execute. Let's just go ahead and put a message box here. Message box, hello. I don't know how to cancel yet. So what we're saying is that when the user clicks, when the user makes this event happen, the click event happen on this object, that's what's going to cause this code to execute. So I'm going to go ahead and run the form. Turns out that if either I'm on the form or I'm on the module that's built into the form and I click play, it'll just run the form. So now I click on OK, nothing happens. I click on cancel, and it says, oh, okay, yeah, I'll run that code. Unfortunately, this form doesn't know how to cancel. Yeah, we've got to teach it how to do that. It's okay, we'll do that. Don't worry, little form, we'll take care of you. Okay. And so that's the first thing to realize here, is that now, so far, when we wanted a macro to execute or a subprocedure to execute, someone had to say, execute this, either by doing a button in the ribbon or running it or calling from another procedure. Now, just a certain set of actions on the form can make it execute. So let's go ahead then and have this do something. Here's one of the two ways to get a form to become invisible and pass the control back to wherever it was called from. And that is, we will say the name of our, we can say the name of our form, what's it called? FRM login dot hide. We're saying we want to hide this form. So when it's visible, kind of the three levels it can be, either unloaded, loaded but not visible, or loaded and visible. When it's visible, it's way up here. When I say hide, it just moves it down to the next level down. It moves it down to saying it's still loaded into memory. The objects and values, the properties are still accessible to my code. It's just no longer visible and no longer in control of the interpreter. So that's what we've done. The nice thing about this is that it's going to give me access to what the user has typed into the form. Let's go ahead and take a look at that. Let's go ahead and do the OK button while we're here. And incidentally, there's a couple of buttons right here that let you go back and forth between the code and viewing the form. So I'll just come back to viewing the form. I'll double click my OK button, and I'll have these do exactly the same thing. So they're just going to hide the form. Both of them will hide the form. I'll need to do something later to be able to figure out which one the user clicked, because I've got to know which one the user clicked. At this point, they're going to behave exactly the same way. All right, so now let me come back to module 1. And at this point, I'm going to click form show. And then let's just go ahead and echo back the username. So message box. Now how am I going to get to that username? Here's how I do it. The username is, or the form is still loaded into memory. And so I'm going to refer to it by its name. Its name is FRM login. There is a control on that form that has a value I want to get to. What's the name of the control? TXT, and you'll notice my IntelliSense help knows about it. TXT email. Dot text or value. In the early days, there was no value. There's only text, but now there's a value. It's a synonym for text. So now we should do a message box, and we're going to show up the value that was shown in there. But you're going to notice that when I run this, this line of code won't execute until I close the user form. Here it is. I haven't shown that message box yet. I put in my email address. Spelled a little incorrectly. That's fine. And doesn't matter if I say OK or cancel at this point. Let me say cancel. And here it now shows me that email address. So the takeaway here is that when I say show, it halts everything. All right. So there's several ways that we can tell, did the user press OK or cancel. I'm going to show kind of let's kind of take the easy way out. This is the easy way. This is the simple way out. I'm going to come back to the form. And on cancel, instead of saying form login hide, there's a shortcut, by the way. When I'm here in the user form, I don't have to know the name of the form. And the whole point is, if the user comes and changes the name of this form, not the user, but if you as a programmer changes the name of this form, and I've got form login written throughout the code, that would really be a nightmare. I would change every reference to it. So instead, there's a synonym that I can use that says, you know what, I don't care what the name of this form is, but the form that this code is on. Kind of like we've got this thing called this workbook. I don't know the name of this workbook, whatever workbook this is. Whatever form this is, the synonym is called me. Me dot, and then you'll see the same choices. So I could say hide here. In fact, I will do that down here on the OK. I'm going to change form login to me. It's actually preferred to use me here because that way you can change the name of the form and your code's still going to work. But you are just referring to the object. You could use the name as well. So hide takes me from visible to loaded but invisible. If I want to go from visible to get me out of here, unload, dump the thing out of memory, I unload it. Hide is a method of the form. Unload is a statement in VBA. So what I'll say is, on this one, unload me. And so this dumps the form out of memory, closes the form, and takes it out of memory. Me.hide just hides the form, but leaves it in memory. Okay, question in the back. Yeah. So if you're in JavaScript and you're going to refer to the object that this code is in, or you want to pass a reference to this object to some other method, you can pass it with self. Yeah, it's very similar to self. Yeah. There's a question over here? No? Okay. Let's do one other thing here on click. Before we hide it, we're going to say, listen, if you're going to click OK, you got to give us a username and a password. So we'll just do that validation right here. Let's say we're only going to hide the form if we meet that criterion. So we're going to say, listen, if me.txt email.value, and we can either say if that's greater than a zero length string, or we can say if the length of that is greater than 0, and me.txt password.value, I'll do one of each. It's greater than a zero length string. Either one is fine. Doesn't tell me there's something there. Then we'll close. Me.hide. Otherwise, we'll give a message. Message box. Hey, you got to give me a username and a password. Close. And I can come in here and say, what, I want this to be critical. This is an error. This is an error. And then I can put a title on this. User error. This is your problem, buddy. We're politically incorrect. So now if I run the form, and I just, say okay here, not gonna close. If I say cancel, it'll close. If I put an email in, not gonna close. Got to have them both. Put a password but no email, got to have them both. Then it will let me move on. Okay, so this is a really simple data validation. What comes to mind that I might want to do? If I'm doing this, what else might I want to look for to make sure they've done something right here? Yeah, you got to have an @ sign in it, and you got to have a dot in it, and there could be some other things that I want to check for. I probably wouldn't really write a full validator for the email address. Why wouldn't I? Because Google is like a click away. Right? I could probably, let's go ahead and do it. This is really, a lot of great VBA code has been written. It's just out there for free. Don't write it again, for crying out loud. VBA, validate email address. Oop. Email as ADE. All right, somewhere, VBA Express validating an email. This is probably pretty good. It's always a good idea to look at these because you never know who really wrote this. They could be a maniac. It's a good idea to look through it and just make sure you agree with it. But chances are they've thought through this. So email, let's see, is this a question or an answer? Or is it an example? Ease of use, easy. submitted by Paleo, whoever Paleo is. Sub email. Here's function is valid email. Looks pretty good. So we're looking for the @ sign. We're doing some other stuff. That's kind of a long function. I don't want to write that. Good thing there's copy and paste. You know, before I put this into production, it would make sense for me to actually, for me to make sure that it looked good. So here, I'm putting this is valid email function. And folks, you don't really have to do this, but if you want to do that, you can. So VBA express, what did I search for? I did that kind of quickly. VBA validate email address. And then it was the first one that wasn't an add. So VBA express, Excel validating an email. And then I just copied the function is valid email and brought it over. There's some function in here. Is email valid? So in fact, just looking at this, what already do I dislike about this particular solution? Well, it's huge, but that may just be what's required. There might be simpler ways to do it. But you know, I'd like to see the type declared for this variable. That's going to be a string. And I probably want to declare the return value of the function. I bet it's Boolean. And I'd like to see that. Yeah, so they're making a Boolean variable in here, and they're probably using that to set the return value. They are. So it's definitely going to be a Boolean value that's being returned. Okay, so now I'm going to make sure that it's there. And then maybe if I get this far, then maybe I'll go ahead and do the check on it to see if it's a valid email. So if is email valid, and I'll be looking at my email address. Then we'll hide. Otherwise, we'll give a different message. Message box is, we'll do a little more simply this time, invalid email address. And VB critical. Folks, if I wanted to get a lot more sophisticated about this, I could have is valid email, instead of returning true or false, based on which of these tests it fails, I could send back a string that's like a message. Hey, your email address has to have an @ sign in it. Hey, your email's got to have a dot in it. Whatever it's failing here, we could give them some more information. At this point, we're just saying, hey, if it's coming back false. Yes, I haven't actually tried this particular code, so hopefully it works. Let's give it a shot. Email address. That's not really my email address, but let's just try that. Invalid email address. That's great. .com. That's probably a valid email address, and so it lets it go through. So that is valid email address. At least passes my very first check. You could tell if there was a dot something in it. Okay. So you get the idea. I can do kind of advanced kinds of data validation right here in the form. I don't have to worry about it out there. I know if I got an email back from this form, it's validated and I'm ready to go with it. But now how do I access it? Let's take a look at the module 1 to see that. So over here in module 1, after the user has done something to dismiss this message box, here's what I know. If the user pressed OK, there's going to be an email address in it, right? Because I'm not letting them close it. I'm not letting them cancel without giving me an email address. If there's no email address there, why wouldn't there be an email address there? So it turns out, if they press cancel, that's going to unload, right? That's going to take me all the way out of memory. Because it takes me all the way out of memory when I click cancel, all the values that are in those properties, poof, are gone. And so if I say, look at that form now, it's actually unloaded, it's out on disk. If I say, look at it and say, what's the email address? It'll load it back into memory, but it'll have no value because it'll have the default, it'll just be blank. And so that's kind of a simple way for me to tell, hey, did the user click OK or cancel? Just have the cancel unload it, have the OK hide it, and then look to see if something that I know has to be there is there. So I'll just do that right here. If the email's value, oh, here, instead of, I'll only show it if there is a value. if the value is greater than a zero-length string, then we'll show the value. So now if the user presses OK, it should just be hidden, but I still have access to the properties on it, should be able to get it. If the user pressed cancel, it should dump the thing out of memory, and when I look at it, it'll be blank. So I've got to put some values in here. Oh, I'm going to regret having actually put a validation on that, so I have to type a real email address. And then put some password. If I say OK, it should show it. If I say cancel, it should just be silent, should just move on and not show anything. Run it again. Say OK. That's invalid. Why is that invalid? Yeah. Is that a bad thing? Yeah, because now I could have an email address at like .info or something. So I'd probably want to look in that and fix that problem. Probably written back when the only extensions were, what were they? .com, .edu, .net, and .mil for military. There might have been .gov. Those were the first 5. .me? Yeah, .me. Okay. So that's one way to be able to tell. Just have your cancel button, dump something off, and if you're saying, you've got to give me some of these fields to be able to press OK, then you'll know that. Now, you may not have that luxury. I mean, it may be that the user, it's valid for the user to leave everything blank and press OK, and you want that to know the difference between OK and cancel. So let's modify this form to be able to do that. In fact, why don't I'm going to copy this form. How do I copy a form? Only way I know to copy this form is to export it and then re-import it. So let's just go ahead and see how to export a form. So here I've got the form selected here. I'm just going to say export file. Great, where you want to call it? Yeah, this document, that's fine. Form login.form, that's great. Now when I try to re-import that, it's going to try to import it with the same name. That's a problem. So let me change the name of this one. I'll call this form login 1. So select it. Come down here, the name, form login 1. And now I'll say I'm ready to import. So I'll choose File, Import, and I'll go find that file that I exported, and that should give me a copy of the file. Form login.frm. Now I've got form login and form login 1. They look exactly the same right now. It's just a copy of the other one. So form login 1 is going to be the example that uses this unload versus hide trick to tell whether you pressed OK or cancel. Let's look at a different approach. And I'll do that on form login. So here, well, use the same validation, but let's do this. Let's create now a public variable. Ooh. We've never made a public variable before. Whenever we made a module level variable with the keyword dim, that's going to be a variable that's only available inside the module. But now I want to have a variable that's here available to anything in this module, but also available from outside of the module. So instead of using the keyword dim, I'm going to use the keyword public. And then I'm going to come here and I will say, I'll say pressed OK as a Boolean. So now I've got a Boolean variable called pressed OK. So far, so good. So now, when the user presses either cancel or presses OK, I'm going to set that value. So let's do it here in cancel. The user presses cancel. We're just going to make sure that pressed OK equals false. Right? They're closing this form, but they didn't click the OK button. And now, instead of unload me, we will just say me.hide. I'll change the comment to make sure that comment's not lying. So now, both the OK button and the cancel button are just going to hide it, take it, make it invisible, leave it in memory. But we'll have another variable that we can look at to tell, did the user press OK or did the user press cancel? So what do we have to do on the OK button? Yeah, just before we say hide, we'll want to say the user pressed OK. So pressed OK equals true. That should do the trick. So now we're going to modify our code that opens this to use a different approach. So let's change this one to work with form login 1, because it's the one that's coded to work with. And I'll call this sub login 1. We'll make another sub procedure that uses this second form called login 2. It's going to call, or we'll just call it login. It's going to be called login1.show. And now we're going to say if form login dot pressed OK is equal to true, then show it, otherwise don't show it. So do you see the difference here? In one, we're relying on the question, is the form in memory or not in memory? In this one, we're saying it's always going to be in memory, but now we just want to have set a variable on that form that we can access from outside of the form. And to do that, it's got to be a public variable. Kind of a lot to bite off in one day. How are we doing, folks? Question? Yeah, name of the form dot the name of the variable on that form. That's because I declared, the question is, well, how does that work? And the answer is because I declared the variable as a public variable inside the code for the form. So here's the module for the form. It's declared right here. It's public, it's got to be public, and has to be in the form module, in the back. Come back to this one. Yep, this has to be the form login 1. Correct. Yeah. So this one's supposed to be looking at our form login 1, our original example. Did I put in the wrong one? Message box form login 1. Yeah. Everywhere I had login 1, that needs to be login 1. And here, login. Yes, thank you for pointing that out. Yeah, we had a couple more that I hadn't updated from changing the name of the form. Yes, question. Oh, okay. So here the question is, well, what if I made this pressed OK just public pressed OK as Boolean here instead of putting it on the form? Would that work? The answer is yes, it would work. When I make a public variable inside a general module, it's available. I don't have to prefix it with anything. It's just wherever I want to refer to that variable, it's available. The reason I don't want to do it this way is that I might have 3 or 4 different forms that I want to know, did the user pressed OK? And if so, I want to call them all pressed OK. And so I would prefer to have that inside the form. So I can say, look at that form, tell me if the user pressed OK, and then we'll decide what to do. So this would work, but it introduces the possibility of having different forms step on each other's toes, and it'll be a lot cleaner if I just leave it declared inside the form login. Yes, question? Yeah, how did I copy that form? It was like magic. How did you do it? And the answer is I exported it. So I just did a right click and export. That will create a text file that actually creates 2 text files that has all the information for the form in it, and then I can re-import that, and that'll bring it in. If I had another workbook open, I could have just copied, I could have dragged it to the other workbook. It would have made a copy, renamed the other one, and dragged it back. So that would have even been faster, but it was helpful to show you how to export anyway. And then to import it, You can like right click anywhere here on forms. You could right click and say import, or file. Import does the same thing. Okay. So this introduces to us this idea of having a variable that is now kind of global in scope. I got to know the name of the form, but I can access this now from any code as long as that form is loaded into memory. Incidentally, back here in my module 1, once I'm done doing whatever I was doing with it, I could come down here and say, now here I'm ready to unload that form. So I showed it. I checked to see what the user did with it and responded appropriately. And then here I could say I want to unload it. And that would unload the form. In the back? Question is, why do we have these as private subs? Where'd they even come from? Did I make these? Oh, it's because, yeah, I was showing you that you could make it private and therefore make it not available through the list of queries. Yeah, I just didn't take that off when I was showing that you could make these private. Yep. Yes. Private what? Presto, P-R-E-S-T-O, Presto, K like that? No, just kidding. No. Yes, does this private just replace the word dim and do the same thing as dim? Yes. Public and private both do the same thing as dim. The only difference, they're both creating variables. The difference is, what's the scope? In this case, private is a synonym for dim. It behaves exactly the same as dim. Public creates a variable but makes it accessible from outside the module. If you get the urge to think, well, what do you need dim for crying out loud? Just come in here and private your variables instead of dim. You can't use private inside a subprocedure. It's got to be dim on the inside of a subprocedure. Okay, a couple other things I want to get to. So far, the code we've activated on this form has been pretty reasonable. Look, we got an OK button here. The user clicks on it, it runs the code. But I want to drive home the idea of event-driven programming. So remember, I told you that it's the name of the object underscore the name of the event. Now look, in our other modules, we've had these two drop-down boxes. We've never looked at them. Let's take a look. On a user form, this drop-down box on the left is going to list all of my objects on the form. It's going to list all of my controls. So I'll use that to select a particular control that I'm interested in, say the OK button. And then this one says, hey, whichever object is selected here, give me the relevant set of events. So I can make code respond to any of the events listed here. So click is the default. When the user exits this, if they're tabbing through it, like when they tab away from it, I can make code execute then. When it's the active button and the user presses a key down, I can say, that triggers an event. When they let the key up, that triggers an event. I mean, it's some low-level stuff. Someone said mouse move. Every time the mouse moves, even 1 pixel on the surface of that button, I could make some code execute. Let's do it. Mouse move. What will we do? I mean, we're going to do something interesting. Let's do this. Let's see. Looks like I must have double-clicked the user form because it built this form. I thought I don't want that one. So let's bring this one open. So let's do this. Let's say when the mouse moves just 1 pixel, let's change something about the button. CMD OK, it's got a property called left. And I want to change that to be a random number times, let's say, the inside width of the form. So the form has a property called inside width. This is going to drive home the fact that I can just have, when an event occurs to an object, fire the code, fire the code, fire the code. Let's play it and see what happens. Now, what causes the event to happen is when the mouse moves over that form. The mouse move event is going like crazy right now over the email, the txt email object. See what happens when it gets to the cancel button? It's firing, but there's no code. When they get to the OK button, it's going to move it to a random position. Now I got a problem here. It could actually show up right behind the cancel button. Incidentally, is it possible for me to click on this? How could I click on it? That's right. There we go. So it picked a random spot that happened to be right under the mouse. If the mouse moves a pixel, I can't click. But if I can manage to click without moving the mouse, I should be able to get it. Yeah, got it. Or what's the other way that I could do it? Enter. Yeah, the enter will trigger that as well. So I don't really need the mouse on it because I got the enter button. Yeah, I'm going to change the, oh, here's another problem. It can go off the form this way because I said the left of it can be anywhere as wide as the inside of the form. So let's do this. Let's correct that problem first. And let's say instead of being a random number times the whole inside, let's do the inside width minus the width of the button. So now I got my whole inside width here. Now the button's like this wide, and so I'm saying the place the left of it can go is only the whole width minus the width of the button, so that if the button left goes there, the whole button's still on. I don't want to pop off the screen altogether. Oh, sorry, not left, width. Yeah, that would be bad. Width. I want the width of the button. Thank you. Inside width. Hey, while we're here, let's not limit it to just moving left and right, but let's set the top equal to a random proportion of the inside height and the height of the button. Oh yeah, so the question is, why doesn't this random number make it go like crazy? And the answer is, RND gives me a random number between 0 and 1. So even if it's the biggest one, it's just going to be the full size of whatever I've specified over here. So now it should move up and down, left and right. The only problem I'm going to have, it could still pop up right behind the cancel button. So to change that, I just want to change the Z order of this. I don't remember how to do that. Maybe I can just send it forward, bring forward. Bring it forward a couple times and see what happens. No, it's still behind it. What's that? Yeah, it's a little bit thick. I'm going to cut that and then paste it in again and see if that puts it lower in the order. There's a Z order method that you can use to change it. Still behind it. I just won't worry about it. Okay, there's a question in the back. No question? Hey, let's do one more thing. This would be a great thing to do. Set this code so it only executes on April Fool's Day, which is coming up, by the way. I'm going to write the joke and see if you get it. You ready? So we're going to change it to a new position. Then we're going to say cmd OK dot width equals do you see what this is going to do? Yeah, so now every time it moves, it's going to get one little bit smaller. It's not quite. It's not a pixel. It'll be unnoticeable at first. Edna in accounting is going to be going, wait, how do I log in? And about this point, she's going to go, is that it? Oh my gosh, it's getting smaller. What am I going to do? I'm in trouble now. It's a little bit smaller. I'm going to get it. Darn it. Where's that? I got it. I'm almost there. Uh-oh. Not even the OK button anymore. It's just the O button. C button. Oh, no. Yeah, vote for Trump. It's still there. It's like one pixel wide. Gone. Yeah. Can I click on it now? No can do. Can I activate it? Sure, enter button's still going to do it. Okay, so that's fun. Would you really actually ever really do that? Maybe once, it gets out of your system pretty quickly, though. But the point that I'm trying to drive home with this example is when an object receives an event, it doesn't have to be the way you'd normally think that it's going to behave, but when an object receives an event, you can trigger code to execute. Okay, questions on what we've done here? In the back. Okay, so the question is it any time they hovered over it, it just moved to a random position? And I think yes, but technically it's not hovering, it's that the mouse moved at least like 1 pixel. So if I was here and it moved it, and it happened to move it so that it was still under the mouse, hovering over it isn't enough to do it. It's the actual act of movement that does it. So yeah, it's not quite hovering, but that's it. That code executes when the mouse moves just 1 pixel within the boundaries of the object. Okay, so to be able to work with user forms, you've got to understand this idea of event-driven programming, that the event happens to the object and you choose the combination, and when those two come together in the life of the form, it triggers the code. But it turns out that this idea of having an object and an event pair, an event triggering code, isn't limited to a form. Let's look at some other places that we can use this same idea. So far, we have not used these objects at all. Oh, I think we have. We've like selected it and changed the name. But have you ever accidentally double-clicked one of these? I'm going to double-click this workbook. Now there's another module here. There's actually a module built into the workbook. We can put code here. And what you're going to see is that there's events that can be triggered here. So I'm going to choose the list. This should be the list of objects I have available. There's not many. Workbook. You can have general or workbook. General is like no object at all, just a regular old subprocedure. Workbook is going to be some kind of event subprocedure that goes along with the workbook. Here's all my different events that I can have happen to the workbook. The default one that it came up with is open. When do you think that's going to execute? When it opens. So what would happen if I did this? What does that do? Yeah, just watch. I'll show you what it does. Save and close. Oh, save. I haven't saved it yet. Save as, browse, put it in my downloads so I can find it again someday. Book 1, better call it XLSM. We saved it. Now we're going to close it. Let's open it up. Here we are, downloads. Sort by date. Is it there? Book 1. Double click. Excel opens. So now book 1's there. Macros have been disabled. Enable the content, and boom, it closes. It's more impressive when you have it, set to default to just enable everything. So if I came to developer, macro security, enable all macros, not recommended. Yeah, I know, whatever. Open it. Yep, and it closes. Open it and it closes. Oh, wait a minute. How am I going to open that now? I guess I could go change the thing back. Or I could say File, get ready to open it, and hold the Shift key down when I open it. And that will suppress any code from executing during the open process. Whoa. Hold the Shift key, baby. It's a powerful key. Hold it down. It doesn't work. It wouldn't work if I was outside here and said just hold the Shift key down and double-click this. That's not going to do it. It still opens it and closes it. You've got to be in Excel, say File, Open, and then hold the Shift key down and open it. That'll suppress the code from executing during the opening process. Okay, so let me go back to that code. This workbook, I really don't want it to say close, but there could be things you want it to do when it opens. It's like every time it opens, you want to, add an entry at the bottom, and you're coming in here to do an entry to some list while you're opening it. Go ahead and add that next entry, put the timestamp in, and then take that person right to that point in the workbook they're ready to go. Yep. Why does the Shift key work? That's what you asked? Why does the Shift key work? I guess it's because, someone said, really would be nice if we could open this workbook without running the code some way. And they said, okay, How about hold the shift key down? Yeah, the guys who wrote Excel said, we want a way to do that, and that's how they decided to make it happen. Works for Access, Word, PowerPoint, any of that. If you've got code in there, you can suppress it by holding the shift key down. Come to think of it, I don't think that probably isn't in the textbook. Probably should be in the textbook somewhere. Okay, so, but we're not just limited, so you can say when the workbook closes, oh yeah, here's a nasty one. How about before save? Boom. When the user goes to save this workbook, what could we do? Workbook.close, save changes, false. The act of the user trying to save the workbook would close the workbook and dump off all their changes. Did I mention April Fool's Day is coming up? But again, the point is here, there are lots of, well, there's not lots of objects. There's one object here for the workbook, but there are many events that I can choose. Look, after a pivot table, what do we have here? After the pivot table syncs, this pivot table just synchronized, execute some code. After window sync, window activate. When this window goes from active to inactive, I can make code execute. There's lots of things I can do here. You're going to find out you don't use very many of these, but when you say, oh yeah, I'd like to do that, it's good to have. All right, so I don't want to leave this one on by accident. That would be painful. But now let's look at a worksheet. So worksheet then, we'll change the worksheet object, and we'll see what the events are here. So when the worksheet gets activated, so as soon as the user activates this worksheet, boom, we can make code execute. Before this worksheet gets deleted, we could do stuff with it. Here's one that's really interesting. Activates, what is it called? Selection change or something. Oh, it's my default one, selection change. So when a new range gets selected on the workbook, we can make code execute. The very fact of selecting a range could trigger, not only can it trigger an event, but we know which range got selected. Let me just do a debug.print on this one. Debug.print target.address. And so all that's going to do is print off, let's see, sub worksheet. We're on this worksheet. Every time I change a range, that should be printing there. What's going on here? Shouldn't have to save it. It might be that when I press that shift, it might have turned off macros altogether. So let me save and close. I don't think it does that though, but let me just go ahead and do a save and a close. Oh, wait a minute. I still have the close code on there, don't I? Shift, open. Darn it. Workbook. Let's get rid of this code. File save, file close, file open. There we go. So now, whenever I select a range, it knows which range is selected. I can do, something. Yeah, we could do. Okay, yeah, let's do this. Enter complaints here. So you're going to enter a complaint. You're going to go, somewhere onto, say, D5. So we could say this worksheet, we can say if target.address equals, and it would look like this, $D $5, then what do we do? Then let's just select something else. Cells, or let's do range. A1 dot select. So we're saying, okay, every time the selection change happens, we'll execute this code. What's this code going to do? It's going to check to see if the user is trying to go to D5, and if so, it's going to send them somewhere else. So if I try to go to that cell to enter the complaint, no matter how I try to get there, it's going to say, no, you can't do that. Actually, that's not true. I could still do it if I click there and drag to a different cell. Now my target is not, it's not just D5. But still, that's my active cell. So if I start typing right now, my complaint's going to go in there. So it's possible to enter it, but you got to know the trick. What's the trick? The trick is you got to give more than one cell. Okay. Again, the point here is that just realize that now that we're talking about objects and events, it kind of opens up the world to you, not just in forms, but both on worksheets and on workbooks. Probably charts. Maybe there's something on charts too. I'm not sure. I've never done anything with charts that has events, but there might be there as well. Okay. The one more thing I guess that would be interesting to show. So how could I modify this to say, you know what, if D5 is in the selection at all? Here's a way I could do that. So I'll do it this way. If the count, so target is a range. So it's going to have a collection called cells. Dot cells, C-E-L-S, dot count. That'll tell me how many cells there are in the selection. And what I want to know is if there are fewer cells, let's see. What I want to know is if D5 is in the selection. Okay, so let's do this. Let me do the union of cells count. Remember, union, I can union together two ranges. I'm going to union that together with range D5. By the way, you're used to saying, if you just say range D5, which sheet are we talking about? If I'm on a general module and I say range D5, I am talking about the active sheet. If I am inside the sheet module for a particular worksheet and I say D5, which sheet am I talking about? The worksheet that this is built onto. So this is not active sheets D5. This is worksheet 1's D5 because it's the code built into that sheet. Okay, so I want to say I want the range, I want the union of the target, and D5. I want to know if the count of that, .cells.count, if that is equal to target.cells.count. Then we want to select A1. You see what this does? First of all, let me see if it works. So what this says is, I want to compare how many cells there are, I'm counting the cells, in this range, which is the union of my target and range D5, with just however many cells there are in the target. So if the target range includes D5, then the union of D5 and that range is going to have the same number of cells as just the target. But if the range is over here and D5 is here, when I union them together, there'll be one more in it. And so we're saying, hey, does that range contain that particular cell? So now, even if I just highlight a portion of it, 2 cells, it'll say, yeah, no can do. Okay. So that's a quick trip around the block using objects, events to do event-driven programming. We'll do a more complex form next time we get together. A lot to do on that one. And that will be on Monday. Remember, your exam is now due a week from Friday. You have until the testing center closes, which on Friday is 9 p.m., so you can make a date of it. Thanks for coming. I will see you on Monday. Class dismissed.